All right, let's begin with an observation activity. What are we looking at in this image? I'll give you a few moments to see. We are looking at a ship in Lock 3 of the Welland Canal. Now, have you been to Lock 3 to see a ship on the canal? I know that I have, because I work at the St. Catharines Museum and Welland Canal Center, right on Lock 3. I get to see ships go through the canal almost every day. It's the coolest job. My name is Sarah Nixon from the St. Catharines Museum, and I am so excited to be here today to talk all about the Welland Canal, why we have a canal, how it works, and its importance to our community. But before we begin, I'd like to start with a land acknowledgement. As we learn about the significance of water this week, let us also reflect on the land in which we gather, understand the history of the land on which we live, and that provides us with this precious resource of water. Niagara region is situated on treaty land, and this land is steeped in the rich history of the First Nations, such as the Haudenosaunee, the Haudenosaunee, and the Anishinaabe, including the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. There are many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people from across Turtle Island that live and work in Niagara today. And the Niagara Children's Water Festival stands with all Indigenous peoples, past and present, in promoting the wise stewardship of the lands on which we live and of the water which sustains us. So let's go on to learn about the Welland Canal, and we'll start with the big picture here. What we're looking at is a map of the Great Lakes and the St. Lawrence Seaway, which connects the Great Lakes all the way to the Atlantic Ocean. Now, spend some time looking at this map. Are there any names that might stand out to you? I know that a couple for myself. Of course, Canada, the awesome country where we live. I also see all 5 Great Lakes. We have Lake Superior, Lake Michigan, Lake Huron, Lake Erie, and Lake Ontario. You might also notice some of the really important cities on the map as well, including Ottawa, our nation's capital, Toronto, and here in St. Catharines that you see highlighted in yellow. The Welland Canal is part of the larger St. Lawrence Seaway, and it helps connect ships to the Great Lakes and the Atlantic Ocean. The Welland Canal is a really important part to the St. Lawrence Seaway system. This shows a different kind of map of the St. Lawrence Seaway. And it really shows how the Welland Canal acts like a giant staircase connecting Lake Erie, which is at top, and Lake Ontario, which is at the bottom. And although it doesn't look like it in this map, the elevation difference between Lake Erie and Lake Ontario is 99.5 meters. That's about as tall as the Peace Tower on Canada's Parliament buildings, or even the Statue of Liberty. That's really tall, and if it wasn't for the Welland Canal, it would be almost impossible to get ships to and from the Great Lakes. And this is why. Who's familiar with this picture? Who's been to Niagara Falls before? I know I have, and I have a really important question to ask. Do you think a ship could get up or down the Niagara Falls? Probably not. Definitely not going up. And if it came down, there might be a shipwreck. So the Niagara Falls actually is an obstacle in connecting transportation and trade between the Great Lakes. Before the Welland Canal, you had to kind of portage and walk around Niagara Falls when you wanted to deliver or trade goods. And to connect Lake Erie and Lake Ontario by ship was impossible. So in 1829, they built the first Welland Canal. This was a system of 40 locks. That's 40, and each lock was a step in a staircase connecting Lake Ontario at the bottom and Lake Erie at the top. And each lock was that step in a staircase going up the Niagara escarpment and bypassing Niagara Falls. The first Welland Canal was built in 1829. That's almost 200 years ago. The current canal that we have today was built in 1932. This canal has 8 different locks connecting Lake Ontario and Lake Erie. But the same idea applies as being a staircase up and down the Niagara escarpment. This is one of the biggest engineering innovations in Canadian history. And what we're looking at in this picture right here is one of those innovations, the flight locks. We really get a sense of that staircase element of the canal with what we're looking at here. You see at the top left corner, we see a ship at Lock 6 at the top of Niagara escarpment. It would descend down to Lock 5 and then one more step down to Lock 4 before it would continue on its journey to Lake Ontario. These are the flight locks. They're also twinned locks, which means that there's 2 locks on either side, allowing ships to go in different directions at the same time. This really lightens the traffic. Now, if we were to compare these 2 different locks, the bottom being an illustration of a lock on the first Welland Canal, and the top being an image of the flight locks on the fourth canal, I want you to take some time to compare and contrast what you see in the differences of these 2 locks. I'll give you some time here, but I know the first thing that comes to my mind is in the first canal, the lock was made out of wood. We see wooden gates and wooden lock walls. This is compared to the fourth canal, the canal we have here, that is made out of concrete, much more sturdier. We also see a difference in the ships. In our first Welland Canal, we have a sail ship that used the power of the wind. Today, we use ships with diesel engines, allowing for much more powerful ships to carry more cargo and allowing the ships to be even bigger. And that's another difference we see between the first canal and the fourth canal, the size of the locks. In the first canal, the locks were about 40 meters long. Today, they're 260 meters long. That's 27 school buses parked front to back. That's a lot of school buses. So this canal is even larger, and it allows for bigger ships to go through the canal as well. Another thing I see, I think that is most of the things I see. Yeah, let's continue on. But those are really the big differences, is the materials, the type of ship, and the size of ship. Of course, there's lots more that I want to talk about, but let's continue on with the presentation. I want to show how a canal actually works. I keep talking about staircases, but what does that really mean? So every lock in the canal is a step in a staircase, and each step is like a giant bathtub. So what we see in the pictures here is a ship going through the gates at the higher end of the canal. It goes in through a lock. The gates close, and like a bathtub, there's these big giant tunnels or plugs at the bottom of the canal, and when they lift or open, the water drains down, lowering the ship in the lock. So the bathtub drains. Now this is 92 million liters of water. That's 92 million cartons of chocolate milk. It's a lot of water, and it only takes about 15 minutes to lower. Now, once the ship is lowered and the water is level with the lower side of the canal, then the gates can open and the ship can leave. That's a ship going downbound from Lake Erie at the top to Lake Ontario at the bottom. Now, if a ship wanted to go up the staircase, it would come in through the gates. The gates would close. This time, the bathtub would fill with water, 92 million liters in 15 minutes, and then the gates would open and the ship can continue up through to go up the staircase. Now, to look at a different image of what I'm talking about here, we have, oh, I skipped ahead. We have Lock 3 from above. So this is an aerial view of a lock from above, right at Lock 3 where I work. So what are we looking at here? Well, we see a big ship numbered 4 in the lock. On either side, numbered 3, are our gates that open and close to let a ship in or out. Now, important is where the water comes from and where does it go? We see a numbered 15 on the bottom of this map here. That's water that's used to fill a lock. It's using gravity to fill a lock full of water. And we also see the numbers 12 and 13. That's called the wastewater. That's the water when it lowers this, that's where the water all goes. So it kind of uses gravity where the water level is higher and the elevation is higher. We use water to fill, and where the elevation is lower, that's where we use water to empty. So we're all using gravity here, which is kind of cool to me because we're using the same elements of the very first canal almost 200 years ago. We use that same elements and technology as we use today. The foundations of the canal haven't changed much. Even if the material has and some of the technology we use, the very basis of the canal remains the same as 200 years ago. I think that's really cool. Now let's see a few more elements of the canal up close. Here we're looking up close on a lock. We see the steel gates. Look how thick and big those gates are. We also see up close how this lock is made out of concrete. We also get a really good sense of how big this lock is. Much bigger than the first Welland Canal. Now, some of the technology on the canal has evolved and become more innovative from 200 years ago. 200 years ago, when a ship went through the canal, in order to keep the ship steady in a lock, they would dock the ship. Workers and sailors would use big, thick rope to dock a ship up on a lock so that it didn't move during the raising or lowering process. But today, we use something called the self-mooring system. We see these big yellow machines in this picture, and those big squares, they act like giant suction cups. They stick out, and like a vacuum, they suction the ship to those big squares and hold the ship in place so that when the water raises or lowers, the ship doesn't move. That's really cool technology and also pretty new, only a couple years old. Another really cool new technology is the Arrestor arm. At each lock on the canal, you'll see this really big, tall, yellow arm. Now this lifts and lowers something called the Arrestor rope. If you look at this picture, you see a big, long rope crossing the water of the lock. This doesn't look like much, but this rope is actually really, really thick and super strong, and its whole purpose is to stop a ship from crashing into the gates. That's how strong this rope is. And the whole purpose of the Arrestor arm is because it's really, really strong and it can lift and lower this super heavy rope. The Arrestor arm helps keep workers on the canal safe. It prevents accidents. There have been accidents in the past of ships banging into the gates and causing damage, but because of the Arrestor arm, this is now avoided. Now, what I find really cool about the Welland Canal, one of my favorite things is when I'm working there at Lock 3 and I see a ship go through the lock, like I did today on my lunchtime. These ships trade with all over the world. They go all over the world bringing goods to people just like us who need them. Now, that's good for connecting the world, but it also has a positive environmental impact as well. For every one ship going through the canal carries as much cargo as 964 transport trucks or 301 train cars. Just think about that for a second. One ship carrying that much cargo. And that can help protect our environment because it's less trucks on the road and more cargo in a ship. And ships also use less carbon and less diesel fuel because they have the water to help guide them as well. So using ships to transport goods and cargo around the world is more environmentally friendly than something like a truck or a train. And I love that idea of the Welland Canal too. The Welland Canal also calls themselves the Highway H2O, the Water Highway. And the ships on the canal carry all different sorts of cargo. This includes ore like coal or salt, some really cool cargo, project cargo like windmill blades or big shipping containers. It also carries grain for us and farm animals to eat like wheat, and also fuel like natural gas. All different sorts of material are carried on the ships and really help make our economy work. The Welland Canal helps create jobs, it helps sustain communities. And what I think is really fun working at the St. Catharines Museum, it also makes a really great afternoon when you're sitting there having a picnic with family and watching ships go by. That's one of my favorite parts. But that's a bonus, right? Because when we think of all of the cargo that this Welland Canal brings every single day. Now, to really explore the cargo a little bit more, I want to do an activity with you. This is a guessing game, okay? So I have these containers of different types of cargo that the Welland Canal carries, and I'm going to get you to guess what the cargo could be. Okay, so we have the cargo here. We can give it a good look, think about what it might be. I'll give it a little shake. Any ideas? I'll give you a hint. Sometimes you might eat this for breakfast. If you guessed oats, you are absolutely right. One of the major cargo on the Welland Canal is oats. Often, these are grown by farmers out west in Saskatchewan. It comes on big trains to the Welland Canal or to Lake Superior to be part of, and on a ship, it goes through the Great Lakes, connects up to the Welland Canal, and eventually goes into both our bellies and the bellies of farm animals as well. All right, next up. Oof, this one might be hard. It's entirely black, like a giant shadow, but in a container. All right. Any guesses? Okay, I'll give you one hint. Santa gives this to naughty girls and boys at Christmas time. Did you guess coal? Coal is another major cargo on the Welland Canal. And this is a really cool one to see. You'll see a big low barge with a giant pile of big black rock on it going through the canal. Coal is taken from places up north, traverses along the Great Lakes through the canal, and then goes to big factories like in Hamilton to be used as fuel. All right. I got one more here. Well, I guess two more. All right, so this is white. So it's white and looks kind of sandy. Any ideas? Okay, I'll just give this one to you. It's salt. Now, would this be salt that you would put on your food at dinner time? Probably not. It looks pretty dirty. This is more like road salt, so it would be mined up north, again, traverse through the Great Lakes, down the canal, and then be used to kind of protect our roads during the winter time and other materials like that. All right, our last one. This is a tough one. So it looks kind of rocky. It looks kind of like the salt, but it looks thicker, like bigger pieces or pebbles. I'll give this one a shake. Any ideas? Did you guess bauxite? Probably not. I didn't even know what that was till I started working at the museum. So this is a mineral that again is mined in places like Northern Ontario, and this mineral has high aluminum content. So it would traverse through the canal and go to a processing facility to make things like aluminum and tin and different metals that we use in all different sorts of ways. I like to share these because it really shows the vast amount of cargo that goes through the canal and how important it is to the economy, to industry, to everyday life. If the canal wasn't transporting materials like this, we might not be able to get certain goods or foods in our stores. So the canal is really, really important to everyday life. And we are so lucky to have it here in Niagara. And we can just watch it on a Sunday afternoon while having a picnic. How cool is that? So, as I wrap up, I really hope that you come visit us here at the St. Catharines Museum, go for some ship watching, and just really get to guess what kind of cargo the ships on the canal carry when they're going through. That's one of my favorite games. So thanks, everyone.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sarah. That was an amazing presentation, and I can't wait until I go on my next walk to see if I can identify what's in all those cargo ships. So we do have a couple questions rolling in, and the first one is from Mrs. Brown's grade 3 class, and they're asking, how many locks does the Welland Canal have?
Oh, that's a great question. So the current Welland Canal has 8 different locks connecting Lake Ontario to Lake Erie. Now that's pretty few considering that the first canal built almost 200 years ago had 40 different locks.
Wow, what a difference. And I have another question, this time from Mr. Clark's grade 4 class, and they're wondering, do any other ships other than cargo ships go through the Welland Canal?
Oh, that's a great question, and they absolutely do. We'll see pleasure crafts like sail ships or yachts go through the canal, and even cruise ships. A couple weeks ago, a brand new cruise ship came from Port Colborne all the way through the canal. And people can cruise on the canal, which is really, really cool. So we'll see that as well. It is kind of funny to see a small little sailboat in a massive lock. It definitely doesn't fit the same way that a big cargo ship does.
That's awesome, Sarah. Thanks so much for that information. And we have another question, this time from Miss King's grade 3-4 class. And they're wondering, how were the canals built and who built them?
Oh, that's a really, really good question. The fourth canal, the canal that we currently have, was built starting in 1913, and it took about 20 years to build. And they used a huge system of, they had their own railroad to bring materials to and from, and they had workers coming from all over the world. These were often immigrants who didn't speak English but wanted a new life here in Canada, so they came to work on the canal. And this was pretty dangerous work. They were using new technologies like the diesel engine and big train machinery, as well as electricity. This was pretty new in the early 1900s, and not a lot of people were well trained in it, so it was dangerous work. Sadly, 138 men did die building the fourth Welland Canal, but their sacrifices allow us to have the canal that we have today, and there is a memorial at Lock 3 honoring these men. But the work was pretty skillful, it was really hard, and they definitely did not have the safety equipment that we have today. So dangerous work, we're really grateful for their sacrifices so that we could have the canal.
Wow, I didn't know that, Sarah. It's so great that we have a memorial to recognize their hard work. And we have another question, this time from Mr. Dunn's grade 2-3 class. And they're wondering, how does the canal regulate its water levels?
That's a really great question. And what I love about this question is it again connects how the fourth canal, even though it was built or was functioning 200 years before the first canal, it uses the same kind of technology to regulate its water levels, which is really just gravity. So we have Lake Erie at the top. Most of the water from the canal is fed from Lake Erie, and it kind of goes down the staircase to open up into Lake Ontario. At every lock, we have big reservoirs and weirs, similar to the aerial picture that I showed in the presentation, and that kind of is reservoir water that's waiting to be used to either fill a lock or empty it. At every lock, there are these giant tunnels that lift and open up to allow water to fill from the bottom. So it fills and empties from the bottom. And there are Seaway workers at every single lock to make sure that everything's working order.
Wow, great information, Sarah. And we have another question, this time from Mrs. Pringle's grade 4-5 class. And they're wondering, how long does it take a ship to travel through all the canals?
Definitely. It takes between 10 and 12 hours to go through the Welland Canal, from Lock 1 all the way to Lock 8. Now, this might seem like a long time, but compared to the first canal, where it took 3 to 5 days to go through 40 different locks, I think 10 to 12 hours is an okay amount of time. And of course, this is all based on how busy the canal is that day also.
Yeah, that's a lot quicker. And so we have a question this time from Miss Valence's grade 3-4 class. And they're wondering, how long is the canal system altogether?
Ooh, how long is the whole canal system? Well, from Lock 1 at Lake Ontario to Lock 8 at Lake Erie, it's about 43 kilometers long. Now, of course, the Welland Canal is part of a larger seaway system, the St. Lawrence Seaway, that's all the way from the Atlantic Ocean all the way up to Lake Superior. So that's much longer. The Welland Canal is just a short, small 43 kilometers, part of a larger system.
Wow, that is a long system. And I have another question from Mrs. Valence's grade 3-4 class, and they're wondering, how many pounds of those materials can each ship hold?
Oh, how many pounds? It's many, many tons, in the thousands of tons. I don't actually think I have that number with me right now, but I can tell you that it's a lot, in the thousands of tons. And every year, the St. Lawrence Seaway, they put out a big announcement of how many tons of cargo the Seaway transports every year, and it's in the billions of tons throughout all of the ships every year. So it's a lot.
Wow, that is a lot of weight that go up and down the canals. So we have another question from the same class, and they're wondering what other materials are carried through the ships, and they want to know, how did bauxite get its name?
Oh, I would love to know how bauxite got its name. I really don't know that answer, but what I find interesting is that the minerals in that rock, so it's a rock that is mined, and they were able to find the minerals in that rock. If you melt the bauxite down, the aluminum kind of comes out, and so once you melt down the rock, the aluminum is what they make all different sorts of materials with. And there's all different sorts of materials on those ships. I only mentioned a couple of them. But as you'll tell from a lot of the cargo ships, they're enclosed. So we don't often know what's in the ships. but there's a couple of guesses. If there's big cylinders on the ships, then they're often carrying a sort of natural gas or other sort of fuel as well. And of course, a barge that's carrying coal, you can see the big piles as well. So sometimes you get some clues about what's in the ships.
I guess we're all going to have to be on the canal and take a look. So we have a question this time from Mrs. Nash's grade 4 class, and they're wondering, where do they get the salt from?
Oh, where do they get the salt from? So there are mines up north. So oftentimes, a lot of the minerals that come through the canal, those would be mined in separate industries, separate companies that are kind of digging through, big deposits in mountains or giant hills or deep underground, and they would mine the salt out, kind of process the salt so that it's usable and transportable, and then they put it on the ships. And the ships are what kind of transport it in order to be used. So I don't know much about exactly where the salt comes from, but I know up north in northern Ontario, as well as there's some areas in the United States as well that are close to the Great Lakes that we mine from, and then they're transported to the ships and directed from there. So I should note that the canal does have connections to both the United States and Canada, so we can get goods from both.
Awesome. Thanks, Sarah. Now, I have another question for Mrs. Nash's grade 4 class, and they're wondering, how heavy is that rope?
Oh, how heavy. These are some hard questions. I don't think I have that statistic with me, but I do know that it must be really, really strong. If we know that the ships themselves are a lot of tons heavy, and that one singular rope can stop a ship from hitting the gate, it must be pretty strong. But I unfortunately don't have that answer with me right now. But also, it needs a whole machine to lift and lower it. So I'd like to think heavy enough that a person could not do it.
That's a good answer, and a great question, Mrs. Nash's class. We'll get back to you. So I do have another tricky question for you. This time it's from Mr. Rivette's class, and they're asking, who invented the canals?
Oh, who invented the canals? So the canal itself is a transit system that's been around for thousands of years, at least several hundred years. But here in Niagara, the idea came from a prominent business person named William Hamilton Merritt. And he had a mill on 12 Mile Creek in St. Catharines, and he noticed that in the fall time there wasn't a lot of water to be used to power his mill, and he wanted a way to get a lot of water all of the time to sustain his mill all year round. He also wanted a way to transport his goods into further areas. He was seeing that a canal was being built, the Rideau Canal in Ottawa, as well as the Erie Canal in New York State. And he said, wow, that looks like a really cool idea. I wonder if we can do that here in Niagara to connect Lake Ontario to Lake Erie. So we had the idea, and he got all of his other wealthy business friends involved, and they started the process in 1824, and it took thousands of workers, mostly Irish and American laborers, to build the canal over 5 years, and in 5 years it was completed. So we like to say that it was William Hamilton Merritt's idea, but of course he was learning from all of these different canals in Ottawa and New York State, and he said, why can't we do that here in Niagara?
Wow, it's amazing what one idea can do. So we have another question, this time from Mrs. Rice's grade 2-3 class, and it's a two-parter. So they're wondering, how does the Arrestor rope stop the ships from moving, and what is the rope made of?
Oh, yes. So the rope is made of very strong metal, and it's all very thin threads of metal that are braided together to be super, super thick. And I think that's how they're able to get it so strong, because it's not just one piece, it's several thousand pieces of threads of metal that are kind of brought together to make a rope. I might have to confirm that with you, but I believe that's how the rope is made. Now, because it's so thick and it's pretty, there is some leeway, like it is buoyant and that it can move a little bit, but the idea is kind of like kind of like I'm not thinking of the word right now, but if a ship could go into it, it would kind of stop and kind of sink back again. So it kind of acts like a barrier, where if a ship, let's say it was really, really windy that day and the ship went to go press into the rope, it would kind of just bounce off and kind of be sent back rather than hit the gate. So it's just an extra level of protection. Of course, the self-mooring system, those giant suction cups, they do most of the work. They're using a vacuum system to keep the ship in place. The arrestor arm is kind of like an added protection. So it crosses over, and if a ship was to get loose or if it was really windy, it might bounce and hit it, but then it would just bounce back because of that barrier.
Wow, it's great to know that we have an extra level of protection for that. So we do have a couple more questions, this time from Miss Mackenzie's class, and they're wondering, how long do the ships usually spend in the canal?
How long do they usually spend? Well, it depends. So I mentioned that if you were to go from Lock 1 to Lock 8, it would take about 10 to 12 hours, but that's depending on what it's doing here. Sometimes a ship will stop at Port Weller dry docks. This is like a repair shop for ships. So if it needs, to fix anything, or maybe something broke, or they need to refurbish something, they'll stay at Port Weller for a little bit. There's also some industries along the canal that they might stop at to pick up or deliver goods. But for the most part, it's 10 to 12 hours. Also, if a ship needs to stop to replenish food or for the sailors, they'll stop at Lock 7 right in Thorold. And then you'll see someone comes with a big crate of food that the ship picks up from like a giant rope and brings on to the ship, and that's how they get their food delivered on the ship, as here in the canal. So that means that they'd have to stop too. So I guess it depends what they're doing when they're here.
Mm-hmm. Great. That's great information, Sarah. And it's so cool that they get food delivered. So we have our final question, and it's from Miss Secchi's grade 3-4 class. And they're curious about how many canals are there across Canada?
Oh, how many canals are there across Canada? I don't think I have that number with you or for you right now, but I do know that there are a lot of different canals and locks even in the St. Lawrence Seaway. So in one of the maps that I shared that I'm happy to send to you later, there's the Welland Canal, but there's also locks connecting Lake Superior and Lake Huron, for example. There's a couple locks connecting St. Lawrence Seaway. Oh yeah, right here, perfect. So every up and down line that you see are different locks or canals connecting even just the St. Lawrence Seaway. So there's several right here in the Great Lakes, and that's just the Great Lakes here. There's also all different sorts of rivers and lakes across Canada that use similar systems. In the Rideau Canal in Ottawa is still operating as a recreational canal, so you can still take your boats and canoes down there as well. So we can count that as a canal also.
Amazing, Sarah. Well, we still have tons of questions coming in, but unfortunately we're out of time. So thank you, Sarah, for all of your amazing presentations today. And we will get back to everyone who has a question. Hopefully I'll sign you up for some extra work there, Sarah. And thank you all for joining us today and for joining us at the 2022 Niagara Children's Water Festival.